to understand the implications of this year's budget allocation, it's important to understand where we were before the pandemic and the lockdowns happened. Unemployment levels in 2019 were very high, and as per leaked consumption expenditure survey leaked by Business Standard, we know that for the first time in 4 decades, consumption had decreased in a 5 year time span. Rural consumption had decreased by 9%, and in fact, consumption of the entire cross section of rural society had decreased. That's the context in which the unplanned lockdown was announced, which we know led to the massive crisis for migrant workers and informal sector at large. And there are multiple studies and surveys indicating the disproportionate impact of the lockdown that's been borne by the informal sector, which constitutes 90% of the country's workforce. And as pointed out by my colleague Amit Basole, the consumption in real terms is still shorter by 3% from what it was before the pandemic. Now, as also pointed out by the economist Deepa Sinha, there are many vacancies in job vacancies in many public programs in the country. This budget was an opportunity to fill that. But instead of supporting employment opportunities, what we see is that there has been a reduction in the National Rural Employment Guarantee Act. As per the revised estimates from this year, the allocation for Narega is 98,000 crore, but the budget estimate for the next year is just 73,000 crore, which is a 25% reduction. And on average, we know that over the last 5 years, 20% of each year's allocation goes in clearing pending liabilities from previous years. And as per calculations done by People's Action for Employment Guarantee, if every household that worked in Narega this year demands work next year, then with the allocated amount, they'll be able to get, on average, only about 25 to 30 days of work. The other important pillar of social security, social protection in the country is the public distribution system or the National Food Security Act at large. But what we see is that there is a reduction in food subsidy from 2.86 lakh crore to 2.06 lakh crore. And remember that the NFSA coverage, the coverage of ration cards, are still done based on 2011 census data. And as per estimates, this alone excludes about 10 crore people. And if you think about other vulnerable households that are naturally excluded, then this reduction in food subsidy is going to hit the poor immensely. This is particularly salient because as per NFHS, there's been an increase in anemia among women and an increase in child malnutrition. And yet, the PMMVY, the Maternity Entitlements Program, did not see any increase. The PMMVY, which we know is itself a dilution of what is there in the National Food Security Act. The other important pillar of social security is public health. But what we see is that there has been really no advancement made on that front either. As per National Health Mission in 2017, the need was to spend at least 2.5% of the GDP in public health program. But what we see is that it's only about 1.3% in this year's budget allocation. This is particularly salient given that the fractured health systems were exposed by the pandemic. There's been a lot of talk about digitization and digital registries in this budget, but that's not going to reduce the out-of-pocket expenditure on medical expenses faced by the poor. The other important area that got really hit by the lockdowns and the pandemic was school education. But what we see is that in real terms, budget allocation for school education is lower than what it was in 2021. And in fact, allocation for midday meals has actually decreased. Now, the other important pillar is the National Social Assistance Program or the pensions. That has been dwindling at 9,600 crore for a long time, which translates to the union government's contribution is just rupees 200 per pensioner per month, and that we can agree is extremely low. So if you think about all these social protection measures, aside from health, the overall contribution is just about 1.4% of the GDP, which is incredibly low. The need of the hour is to build human capital. And it's important to understand that a healthy and a well-nourished society is not just a constitutional imperative, but it has a strong economic rationale. If people have food to eat and have money to buy, then the aggregate demand will increase, the consumption will increase. That will have a multiplier effect in the economy, and overall we'll see a growth in the economy. But this total budget outlay this year is very fiscally conservative, because in real terms, the budget outlay this year is approximately the same as what it was in 2021. So we don't, the government's effort at contributing to the social sector has actually not been good.
If you like this video, share it and subscribe to Business Standard. For more news, views and insights, log on to www.business-standard.com. Do also follow us on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Telegram and LinkedIn.